Ubiquiti devices exposed, BITSLOTH backdoor, Minecraft and Discord used for DDoS, Illinois voter breach, DNS poisoning to deploy malware, a Telegram-controlled rat now affects Linux, a fake car ad campaign delivers malware. All this and more in today's episode of the Cybersecurity Digest. Hello and welcome back to the Cybersecurity Digest, where our goal is to help you stay informed so you can stay secure. Today is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. To the first-time listeners, welcome, and to my return listeners, welcome back. As always, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check out the show. If these episodes help you stay informed, I would greatly appreciate it if you would please share the show out with a colleague or someone you know who likes staying up to date on cybersecurity news. Before we dive into today's topics, a quick reminder, this podcast is now released twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. With fewer episodes, this show has been divided into 3 sections depending on the news. First, we have notable news, second, Prevalent Patches, and lastly, our CISA Corner. I would love your feedback on the show, and in today's show notes, there is a survey that will help me know how I am doing. If you could please fill that out, I would greatly appreciate it. Another update regarding the show here is this will be our last week in this format. In fact, I believe Friday there will not be an episode this week, just due to some personal circumstances. With that, I just want you all to be aware of that. That way you're all kept up to date about what is going on. Just to provide you all with some insight, outside of here, I do have a family, I work a full-time job, and I'm also going back to school. When I first started this show, I did not realize how much time it would take. However, I'm not going to be stopping the show. Rather, yet again, we're going to have a pivot, and I think that this will be much more sustainable. That way, the content I'm providing for you all in the show will be more relevant. If you like the news that I am providing for you in this show, I'm going to be working on producing a newsletter that I will be publishing that will have these types of links in there. That way, you can stay up to date on your own, and then the podcast itself will become a top 10 style format of the top news of that week. That way you can make sure that you did not miss anything throughout the week, and you can start your work weeks on Monday, ready to tackle anything that you may have missed. One last thing before we dive into today's stories, as with all of our other episodes, all of the articles referenced or discussed will be in the show notes. These are arranged in the order they appear within the show, as well as are divided according to the section of the show that they appear in. All right, enough of the miscellany. Let's dive on in to our first section, Notable News. Do you remember the attacks back in 2019 that caused denial of service on certain Ubiquiti cameras and devices? Well, 5 years later, Checkpoint Research had discovered that there were over 20,000 devices that were still vulnerable to similar style issues. Last week, Checkpoint Research disclosed they recently assessed the Ubiquiti G4 Instant Camera and its accompanying CloudKey Plus device, uncovering the remaining vulnerabilities. A little bit of history here for you. In 2019, a denial of service attack on Ubiquiti devices was reported. These were exploiting a service on UDP port 10,001. Although Ubiquiti has addressed this vulnerability, a significant number of devices are still at risk. Checkpoint Research revealed that 2 custom privileged processes on the camera's network interface, which were using UDP protocol ports 10,001 and 7,004, could lead to a complete compromise of the devices. Checkpoint Research elaborated that their investigation involves sending spoof discovery packets on their internal test network, which elicited responses from both the G4 camera and the CloudKey Plus devices. Although these devices did not respond to internet probes due to specific network setups, Checkpoint Research identified over 20,000 Ubiquiti devices that were on the internet that had responded to the spoof packets. The exposed data from these devices include detailed information about the devices and their owners and poses a significant risk for social engineering attacks. Some devices had even displayed warnings indicating that they had been compromised. Checkpoint Research also stated in their article that they had contacted Ubiquiti about the issue and that if devices are running the latest firmware, they should no longer be vulnerable to this particular issue. So if you have a G4 camera or a Cloud Keep device, make sure that they are up to date. Alright, let's move right along here to our second story. Also from last week, security researchers at Elastic Security Labs discovered a new backdoor that leverages Windows Background Intelligent Transfer Service, or BITS. They have named this attack vector BITSLOTH. This new method of command and control was uncovered during an intrusion in the Latin America region. Elastic Security Labs noted that BITSLOTH has been in development for several years and has had vast functionality that includes everything from keylogging to screen capture capabilities. The malware's primary goal is to gather data from victim machines, and it was notably used in an attack on the foreign ministry of a South American government. BITSLOTH's execution involves a shellcode loading project called RingQ, which converts Windows executables into custom shellcode for in-memory execution, bypassing traditional defenses. The attackers also utilized the stowaway utility to proxy encrypted traffic to their command and control servers, concealing their activities. After gaining initial access, the threat actor moved laterally, deploying BITSLOTH as a DLL within the program data directory and using a traditional sideloading technique with FL Studio to execute the malware. The malware's use of bits for command and control operations is particularly noteworthy, as bits is typically associated with trusted software updates. This is making it an appealing target for adversaries. BITSLOTH cancels existing bits jobs on the victim machine, creating new jobs that masquerade as legitimate Windows updates. This technique allows the malware to operate under the radar, as many organizations struggle to monitor bits network traffic effectively. The malware uses common Windows APIs for these functions and compresses the collected data into zip files for exfiltration. Additionally, BITSLOTH employs a hard-coded mutex to ensure only one instance runs at a time and uses a client-server architecture with the command and control server embedded into each sample. The malware's development history dates back to December 2021 and reveals a consistent effort to refine its features and evade detection over time. The use of simplified Chinese strings and specific scheduling components suggests a well-organized development process. Despite its sophistication, BITSLOTH lacks obfuscation around control flow or string encryption, relying instead on its unique use of bits for stealth. Elastic Security Labs has created Yara roles to identify BITSLOTH and provided observables to download to aid in detection, as well as other IOCs. If you would like to read more, you can find those in the show notes. Discord and Minecraft generally complement each other quite well, however, generally they are not used like this next story. Last week, Aqua Nautilus researchers posted a blog post discussing a newly uncovered DDoS campaign they are calling Panamorphy. This campaign utilizes the Java-written Minecraft DDoS package MinePig. The threat actor, identified as Yawixu, gained initial access through a misconfigured Jupyter Notebook honeypot that was set up by Aqua. The threat actor downloaded a zip file containing 2 jar files, which were new on VirusTotal and had minimal detection. The attack involves using Discord to control the DDoS attack, which in turn causes a TCP flood to overwhelm the target server's resources, leading to a denial of service. Aqua Security's full research, as well as more about the threat actor, can be read in the full article from Aqua. In recent news, a significant data breach has raised concerns for Illinois voters over their information. On Friday, security researcher Jeremiah Fowler posted of a recent discovery where he had uncovered sensitive voter and election documents for 4.6 million voters that were exposed online. These documents, which included voter records, ballot templates, and other election-related materials, were found in 13 unprotected databases managed by Platinum Technology Resource, which is an Illinois-based technology contractor. The researcher identified additional exposed databases by simply replacing the county name in the database URLs, revealing that some databases were password protected but still vulnerable to unauthorized access. The exposed data contained personal information such as voter names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, as well as driver's license numbers. The exposed information also included candidate details such as phone numbers, email addresses, and home addresses, as well as petitions with voter signatures. Although no immediate signs of wrongdoing were found, the potential risk posed by this data exposure are considerable, including voter intimidation, disinformation campaigns, and identity theft. I highly recommend you check out Jeremiah's full report if you'd like to read more about his recommendations on how to prevent this, as well as if you would like to see redacted samples of the information he was able to locate. As discussed on this show in the past, threat actors are constantly changing their attack vectors and methods. On Friday, a Washington, D.C.-based cybersecurity firm, Velexity, posted an in-depth blog post discussing some new methods used by the threat actor the firm has called Storm Bamboo. This threat actor was formally identified as Evasive Panda. Velexity notes that these new infections affected both Mac OS and Windows systems across various victim organizations. The infection vector was identified as a DNS poisoning attack at the Internet Service Provider level where Storm Bamboo altered DNS query responses for specific domains tied to automatic software update mechanisms. This allowed the attackers to deploy malware such as MACMA and PocoStick by exploiting insecure update mechanisms that did not properly validate digital signatures. MACMA is malware that targets Mac OS, while PocoStick is malware that targets Windows operating systems. Velexity's investigation revealed that Storm Bamboo targeted software with insecure update workflows, redirecting HTTP requests to attacker-controlled servers hosting malicious installers. Velexity noted that this method is similar to a previous incident involving another threat actor dubbed Drifting Bamboo, suggesting a possible connection between the two threat actors. Both attackers have used DNS poisoning to resolve legitimate host names to an attacker-controlled server in Hong Kong, which facilitated the deployment of malware via automatic updates. The attackers also used DNS poisoning to control second-stage command and control servers. Velexity worked with the affected internet service provider to mitigate the attack, which ceased after key network components were rebooted and updated. During their investigation, the specific compromised device within the ISP's infrastructure could not be pinpointed. Velexity noted of Storm Bamboo's sophisticated methods post-successful compromise included deploying a malicious Google Chrome extension that they have named Reload EXT. This extension was observed on a Mac and exfiltrated browser cookies to a Google Drive account controlled by the attacker. The extension was installed by modifying the Secure Preferences file in Chrome and used obfuscated JavaScript to carry out its functions. The attacker's ability to compromise third parties, such as internet service providers, to breach intended targets demonstrates their advanced capabilities and significant investment in developing and maintaining various malware payloads. If you would like to conduct some threat hunting to find out if you or your organization has been impacted, Velexity has a list of Yara roles as well as IOCs linked in their full article. Over the last few years, there has been observed cyber attacks that go hand in hand with the escalation of kinetic warfare throughout the world. Some examples of this can be observed with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and more recently, the Israel-Hamas war has seen these types of escalations. Late last week, the Jerusalem Post shared an article that an organization that goes by We Red Evils claimed responsibility for a recent internet outage in Iran. The Jerusalem Post noted that the group had posted, and I quote, "In the coming minutes, we will attack internet systems and providers in Iran. A severe blow is on the way." End quote. The outage caused internet outages for several areas across Tehran. The Post noted that this group has operated in a non-official capacity since the beginning of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Personally, I find the overall trend of cyber escalation in conjunction with the kinetic conflicts to be worth noting. We as cybersecurity practitioners need to keep the global news context in mind with our threat intelligence to ensure that we are changing our tactics and bolstering measures if necessary. The book is older now, but Cyber War, the Next Threat to National Security and What to Do About It by Richard A. Clarke had discussed this type of escalation. If you're interested in reading more about this type of conflict as well as this correlation between kinetic and cyber warfare, I would definitely think it's worth your time to check out that book. Alright, moving right along here. Also last week, Broadcom had posted an advisory regarding the return of a Telegram bot-controlled remote access Trojan called TGRAT. The malware had first been observed targeting Windows systems to deliver malware back in 2022. Broadcom notes that the malware was observed being distributed in the wild this month, now as a Linux variant. The malware enables actors to conduct malicious activities such as executing arbitrary commands, all the way to extracting files from the system. If you would like to read more about the IOCs, you can find them in the Broadcom posted advisory, which is linked to this show. Bleeping Computer reported on Saturday of a new cross-cache attack dubbed Slubstick. This new attack method boasts a 99% success rate in converting a limited heap vulnerability into an arbitrary memory read and write capability. This attack, developed by researchers from the Graz University of Technology, was demonstrated on Linux kernel versions 5.9 and 6.2, and used 9 existing CVEs in both 32-bit and 64-bit systems. Bleeping Computer also noted that Slubstick was effective even with modern kernel defenses like SMEP, SMAP, and KASLR active. The researchers plan to present their findings at the upcoming Usenix Security Symposium conference. Bleeping Computer also highlighted in the article the following information about the new attack vector. Slubstick exploits a heap vulnerability such as a double free, use after free, or out of bounds write to manipulate the memory allocation process. By using a time-side channel, the attack determines the exact moment of memory chunk allocation and deallocation, allowing the attacker to predict and control memory reuse. This method significantly increases the success rate of cross-cache exploitation to 99%, making Slubstick a practical tool for attackers. The attack requires local access on the target machine with code execution capabilities and the presence of a heap vulnerability in the Linux kernel. Despite these requirements, Slubstick offers significant benefits to attackers, including the ability to achieve privilege escalation, bypass kernel defenses, perform container escapes, or use it as part of a complex attack chain. In the post-exploitation phase, Slubstick could modify kernel structures or hooks to maintain persistence, making malware harder for defenders to detect. The researchers have published a technical paper detailing the attack and potential exploitation scenarios, and the exploits used are available in their GitHub repository. If you would like to read more about this, definitely check out the full article from Bleeping Computer. Unit 42 posted about a newer campaign they have discovered being conducted by APT28, aka Fancy Bear, or as Unit 42 calls them, Fighting Ursa. This article describes that this group is associated with Russian military intelligence. In the campaign, they used a phishing lure involving a fake car advertisement to distribute the headlace backdoor malware. The campaign, which likely began in March 2024, targeted diplomats and utilized public and free services to host various stages of the attack. The infection chain began with a URL hosted by webhook.site, a legitimate service often used for development projects. The malicious HTML page returned by this URL checked if the visiting computer was Windows-based, and if so, created a zip archive from base64 text in the HTML. This archive contained a file with a double extension .jpeg.exe, which appeared as a .jpeg file to users with default Windows settings. This file was a copy of the legitimate Windows calculator file calc.exe and was used to sideload the malicious DLL file windowscodex.dll. Windowscodex.dll is a component of the headlace backdoor. The DLL file executed a batch file zqtxmo.bat, which started a process for Microsoft Edge to run content passed as base64 encoded text. This text created a hidden iframe that retrieved content from another webhook.site URL. The batch file saved this content as a JPEG file, moved it to the program data directory, changed its extension to .cmd, and executed it. This process ensured that the malware was executed while minimizing its exposure to analysts. The article attributes this activity to fighting URSA with a medium to high level of confidence based on the tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, used. It also believes that this is attributed to fighting URSA based on the characteristics of the attack infrastructure as well as the malware family involved. To defend against such attacks, I suggest you check out the full article for more details as well as a full list of IOCs. Bleeping Computer posted on Monday of a significant ransomware attack on the electronic manufacturing provider Keytronic. This attack resulted in losses exceeding $17 million and was first detected on May 6, 2024. The attack disrupted operations at Keytronic's facilities in Mexico and the United States and impacted business applications and corporate functions. Bleeping Computer notes that the company incurred approximately $2.3 million in additional expenses and lost around $15 million in revenue during the fourth quarter. The ransomware attack forced the company to shut down its domestic and Mexico operations for 2 whole weeks. During this period, the attackers stole personal information from Keytronic systems, including human resources, finance, engineering, and corporate files. The Black Basta ransomware gang claimed responsibility for the attack and leaked the stolen data on their dark web website. The company, Keytronic, has yet to provide further details on the incident, including the number of people affected by the data breach. If you'd like to read more information about the report from Bleeping Computer, you can find the full article linked in the show notes. Alright, last up for our notable news section here today. This comes from Recorded Future's blog, The Record, and it posted last week that the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission have filed a civil lawsuit against TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance. This suit is alleging significant violations of children's privacy laws. The lawsuit claims that TikTok has been knowingly allowing children to create accounts and interact on the platform without parental consent in violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. The DOJ asserts that TikTok has been collecting and storing personal information from children, including those using the app's quote-unquote kids mode, and sharing this data with third parties without notifying parents. The complaint highlights that TikTok's internal policies were insufficient in identifying and deleting accounts created by children. Until mid-2020, TikTok allegedly shared data from children's accounts with companies like Facebook and AppsFlyer for purposes beyond internal operations, such as retargeting less active users. The lawsuit also points out that TikTok allowed users to bypass age verification by using login credentials from other services like Instagram and Google, resulting in accounts with unknown ages. TikTok has responded by disputing the allegations, stating that many of the claims are based on past practices that have since been addressed. The company emphasizes its ongoing efforts to protect children, including implementing age-appropriate experiences, screen time limits, and additional privacy protections. Despite these measures, the FTC and DOJ argue that TikTok's actions necessitate legal intervention to prevent further violations and protect children's privacy online. This lawsuit underscores the ongoing scrutiny TikTok faces from U.S. authorities, especially in light of previous COPPA violations and national security concerns. If you would like to read more of the article from The Record, you can find it attached in the show notes. Alright, that wraps up our notable news section here today. It is time to move on to the next section of the show, Prevalent Patches. Bitdefender has patched a critical vulnerability that is tracked as CVE 2024-6980 and affects Bitdefender's Gravity Zone update server. This is a crucial component for distributing security updates for Bitdefender users. This vulnerability has a CVSS score of 9.2 out of 10 and allows attackers to perform server-side request forgery attacks, potentially leading to unauthorized access and data breaches. Only on-prem installations of Gravity Zone console versions prior to 6.38.1-5 are affected, while cloud-based instances remain secure. Organizations are urged to update to version 6.38.1-5 immediately to mitigate the risk. Last up in our Prevalent Patches section here today is one that comes from SonicWall regarding Apache OFBiz. On Monday, SonicWall posted that the SonicWall Capture Labs team had discovered a critical pre-authentication remote code execution vulnerability in Apache OFBiz. This vulnerability is identified as CVE 2024-38856. This flaw has a CVSS score of 9.8 out of 10 and affects versions up to 18.12.14. The vulnerability arises from a mismatch in the authentication mechanism where the request URI and override view URI values are calculated differently. This causes confusion in the authentication checks. The confusion allows unauthenticated access to certain endpoints such as program export by chaining them with endpoints that do not require authentication. These unauthenticated flaws can lead to remote code execution. Users are strongly advised to upgrade to version 18.12.15 or newer to mitigate this risk. It is recommended that if you are not on this version of OFBiz that you patch as soon as possible. Alright, that rounds out our Prevalent Patches section. On to our final section of the show, our CISA Corner. Alright, for today's CISA Corner, there's only one thing to mention. CISA has added one vulnerability to its known exploited vulnerability catalog, tracked as CVE 2018-0824 and boasting a CVSS score of 7.5 out of 10. This vulnerability has the following description according to the National Vulnerability Database, and I quote, "A remote code execution vulnerability exists in Microsoft COM for Windows. When it fails to properly handle serialized objects, aka Microsoft COM for Windows Remote Code Execution vulnerability. This affects Windows 7, Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows RT 8.1, Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2012, Windows 8.1, Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows 10, and Windows 10 servers." End quote. Alright, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Cybersecurity Digest. As mentioned earlier, all the links and articles mentioned in the show are in the show notes. Additionally, you can head to thecybersecuritydigest.com to find links to this show in your podcast platform of choice. If you like this episode, please consider sharing with someone you know who would like this show. Lastly, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave this show a rating in your podcast platform of choice. Also, as mentioned at the beginning of this show, there is going to be a little break until our next release. I'm going to be working hard in the background to get the new format created. Just to recap, I will be publishing a newsletter that contains the news, while the podcast will be transformed into a top 10 stories from this past week. I appreciate your continued support, and please tune in to check out this new format once those episodes are published. Before you resume your week, here is your dad joke. I can't believe I was robbed, and they stole my limbo stick. I mean, how low can you go? Alright everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, stay informed to stay secure.